is Air Force. And lo and behold, I passed my pilot aptitude battery test, uh, annoying my father, who was a die-hard infantryman. He didn't like the idea, and I was sent back to school. In fact, he said, "You are not going to join the army. You are going back to school and pursue your studies. You are getting a scholarship. You are doing well. Very few people in our system do well in studies. One is doing well, so you might as well continue with studies." I think it took a little time for me to convince the headmaster that I think I have enough of studies and let me go to NDA. Rest is all a big story.
Actually answered the next part also, because I was just about to say that the army almost lost you through the Air Force, and I think even during your time in the army, there were times when you've spoken excitedly about flying sorties in the Jaguar, for example. At the later part, I think when you were posted in Punjab, for example. Well, one of the issues that also sort of repeatedly came through, and what is fascinating is I think it was only in the last 3 to 4 years that the birth age issue actually came out into the public domain. But when one reads your autobiography, what's also interesting is it seemed to have actually featured for quite some time. Now, the confusion seems to have started with filling up the UPSC forms. What exactly happened there? It would be interesting for us to actually sort of get your perspective on that.
So I've mentioned as the events passed by. It's been mentioned in the book also. In those good days, when you were in a hostel and your certificates and all had been deposited by your parents when you joined in class 1, you actually didn't know what was there in the register. Today, the generation is much more smarter. They know when they were, where is their birth certificate and where is their hospital certificate and where is their other certificates. We were, I think, too naive. So when this form, like I said, these 4 gentlemen, they said, "You have to fill up this form." So I said, "But what do I fill up as date of birth?" They said, "Go and check from the thing." And there was one of the teachers, he said, "I have checked it up and it is 1950. Give me that 1950 and that's the end of it. I forgot about it. It is only when the certificates were submitted, before you go for the final thing, you have to submit your certificate. You can't go without that. The UPSC pointed out that, "Guy, you have given us a certificate of 51, but you have entered the date as 1950. So till the time you don't explain this, you are not going to ND." And once that was explained and the school did the explaining and my father did the explaining, I went through and I forgot about it. I said, "That's the end of it. The matter is ended." But I suppose such funny clerical mistakes, if I can call it, they keep occurring sometime or here. And just when I thought everything is over, after 36 years in the service, somebody pulls out this UPSC form and says, "Hey, your UPSC form says so. We don't believe our record. We believe the UPSC form. We don't believe your matriculation certificate, but we believe the UPSC form." It was as absurd.
Coming to that 1971 war that you were actually talking about in Bangladesh, you've spoken about the time when patiently building up troops around the border before you actually did finally get the political sort of decision to go in. And after the war sort of ended, you mentioned one part of your book about how the northeast region actually, if you could have redrawn that particular boundary at that point of time, just after the 1971 war got over, the northeast part of the boundary was cut off from the water sort of sources. So that's a very interesting point that you had. I think you were talking about the Chittagong sort of tracks, and if you could just give your perspective on that point.
See, 71 war, most of us know why and how it happened. And since one was a participant in it, I put down the flavor that I felt at that time as a young officer of going with the Mukti Bahini, doing various things, going in the actual operations. What also is very vivid in my mind is the type of atrocities that were committed on the Bangladeshi population by the Pakistanis. Very, very vivid. Very, very vivid. I mean, I don't think this issue has been talked of anywhere. Somehow, we as a country have, pushed it under the carpet and forgotten about it. I mentioned in my book that in Chittagong, when we liberated Chittagong, the medical college out there had a race improvement camp, something that you only hear of Hitler era, a race improvement camp with hundreds of women who were in some state of pregnancy. They were trying to improve the Bengali race by the soldiers. It was horrible. And unfortunately, some of these Pakistani soldiers didn't feel repentant about it at all. And I have mentioned this incident where when we were filling up the forms, this officer asked me, "Do you know how many people can be killed by one bullet?" And I said, "No." He says, "I've tried it out. So many people can be killed by one bullet." It was as horrific as that. But what is important is what has been pointed out. I think that was a time when we could have utilized the generosity and the goodwill that Bangladeshis had for India for liberating their country and for putting it an even keel at that time. And maybe it would have been possible for us to reconnect our northeast, which at the moment is only connected by a very thin strip of 22 kilometers, which is called the Siliguri corridor. It would have been possible. Today we are, off and on. We have gone through all kinds of relations. We have gone through all kinds of political dialogue, but nothing seems to be working out because a smaller nation always feels that the bigger one is trying to take more advantage of it. And you have to play this game in a different manner altogether if you want advantage for yourself. I mean, ultimately the solution must result in a win-win for all rather than a win and lose situation.
The other sort of incident you also mentioned briefly earlier was the Operation Meghdoot that happened in 1984. And to this day there's been this debate that's ongoing about demilitarization of the Siachen glacier. During those operations itself, it started, I think, as a response to the expeditions that the Pakistani troops were sort of sending there. You did speak about the importance of the Jongla Pass, which is also that particular area which is called Tanso. And how, you felt that we were not proactive in terms of trying to secure those passes as compared to it was the Pilafon and the Siada passes. Even today, for example, we don't have control of those passes, right? Only Jongla, but the other two, of course.
Other two are with us. See, Operation Meghdoot was not just a reaction to what the Pakistanis were sending as terms of their expeditions and allowing their expeditions to go through. If you go through the way the whole agreement on Kashmir has been, area beyond what is the map point called NJ 9842 was left undemarcated because there was nothing out there. And the understanding was that since there was nothing in this area and no fighting has taken place, the status is what it was, which means that it is part of India. And therefore, anybody moving into that was transgressing into the territorial area, if I can call it, of India. And that is why there was a reaction to it. It is important to us. It is important because it brings you directly into Patapur. It allows a link up to take place through the Remo group of glaciers to Karakoram Pass. A lot of people don't. Today we are making a road through the Remo group of glaciers. Very, very difficult proposition. If someone was to go and see those glaciers, Remo group, which I have gone and seen, very difficult to make a road out there. Maybe somebody will have to make a tunnel to go under the glacier to put the vehicles through. But there was a connectivity that would have been available if this area was occupied. And it was to uphold the principle that this area belonged to India, that it was occupied in difficult times, in difficult conditions. And like I said, one felt at that time after reading all the mountaineering expeditions that had taken place in the area that Yongla was important. But then, a junior officer can only point it out. The decision has to be taken by a senior officer. So be it. So Yongla is not with us. Yongla is with Pakistanis, and it continues to be with them. And it's a kind of an aberration over this entire line that on the Saltoro ridge line that belongs to us.
So what you're trying to say is that the Yongla actually, if it was with us, would that have had an impact on China's sort of nexus with Pakistan and the Shaksgam Valley, for example?
See, Shaksgam Valley is well north of the glacier. It is north of Indira Valley that you go into Shaksgam Valley, which is what has been ceded by Pakistan to China. Yongla allows you entry into the glacier per se. The first expedition that found the snout of Siachen Glacier came through Yongla, not through Siala and Bilafar. And they are the ones who called it Siachen because of the wild roses that grew along the snout of the glacier. So that allows you connectivity, and had we occupied that, movement of our troops onto this area would have been that much. We lost a lot of people. We have lost, because the area is very treacherous. The other route that we had to make, it is full of crevasses. We have lost helicopters, we have lost troops, we have lost people in avalanches. The very first lot that we lost was 19 people from the Kumaon battalion in that area. And we don't know where they are. We still don't.
On the demilitarization, I think in your book you've spoken about, you've argued against demilitarization also in terms of sort of conditions that exist there.
I always hold this. Nations' interests are not governed by emotional reasons. Nations' interests must be governed by very pragmatic. Siachen and that area, in fact, why do Pakistanis call it northern areas? They don't call it part of POK, they call it northern areas. It doesn't, they were quite conscious that legally that area doesn't belong there. And here we are saying, hey, let's demilitarize, let's pull back, let them come into this area. Going back and taking that area will be that much more difficult. So, and today the troops are quite comfortable. I've seen when it was very difficult to move into that area, right in the beginning. Well, today things are much better. And I mentioned the incident, how resourceful the Indian Army is. We had bought a huge oversnow vehicle, and we didn't know how to transport it. And there was no road existing to the snout of the glacier. So, 3-ton vehicle, as it used to be called, a truck, was modified with extra space created so that this vehicle could be loaded. And a lot of places with the vehicle power combined with human power, it was pushed to reach the snout of the glacier so that it could carry on. But that's the resourcefulness of the army. They innovate wherever they can.
The other issue also which happened immediately after, on which I sort of want your perspective on this, was also the IPKF experience in Sri Lanka. And it's kind of interesting because right now also, we've been having this talk over how we are formulating our policies towards Sri Lanka itself. And you've actually very nicely described this dilemma that we seem to face in terms of, how do we handle this entire situation with the people in Tamil Nadu having their sort of point of view, especially with the Tamilian cause. On the other hand, the Indian government, especially after the Rajapaksa government, the government started inflicting heavy casualties on the LTT. The Indian government was tacitly supporting the Sri Lankan government in that sense. So, we seem to be in a sort of a dilemma when it comes to our Sri Lanka policy, which was also characterized by the recent non-visit of Manmohan Singh itself. If you can just expand on that particular, which I thought was very interesting in your book.
See, having been as part of IPK, having seen things right from the time that the agreement was signed and staying there for almost 2 years, I'm a firm believer that policy-wise, we as nation failed miserably. And again, it is because of personal, you can say, prejudices that enter policy making. Most of the policy at that time was being dictated by Mr. Dixit, who was the High Commissioner in Sri Lanka, who was the LTT hater. So everything that happened in a manner in which we who had gone as protectors of Tamil population landed up fighting the LTT. How? What do you call it? I think you will call it as the most miserable failure of policy that can take place. I mean, if Jayawardene, after the first year of IPKF, goes on the Sri Lankan TV and says that we are very happy that in the last 1 year, not a single Sri Lankan soldier has died, while we were losing. What else is it but not a policy thing? I think there was a lot of cloudiness, a lot of fogginess in the way the whole thing was pushed through. And the fact that the agreement was between the government of India and the government of Sri Lanka by not incorporating LTT or the militant groups into it, it was bound to a failure. And that is why the whole thing, right from beginning, when late Prabhakaran started testing the Indian resolve and the fogginess, if I can call it, he realized that he can have a heyday. And the whole thing was pushed in a manner in which we landed up as villains in that game. So much so that when Prem Dasa took over as the president, he was assisting the LTT in fighting the IPK. Can you have anything worse than this? So this is, I think it has been a miserable failure. We could have made things much better, which would have given us a great amount of advantage and leverage with our neighbor. It is not so today. Today, the present Sri Lankan government is playing India against China and against anybody else. And it's quite clear that since Indian policies are dictated by domestic politics, therefore India should have minimum economic stake in Sri Lanka. So most of the economic stakes which would have benefited us are going to China. They are not coming to us at all, despite the amount of money that we have given as aid to Sri Lanka.
You've spoken about these various challenges that, as you were rising up through the ranks. I remember this incident you spoke about, if I was right, in Samba, which was about corruption, which the corruption that existed within the system itself. And then, of course, you've also spoken about the deficiency in ammunition, in sort of the equipments that are sort of bought in, and the procurement itself. I think you briefly touched upon the sort of bureaucratic hurdles that exist both within the military and the civilian part. And then subsequently also you've spoken about how the defense budget largely was unutilized, and how you sort of when you became the army chief, I think it was 2011-12 when for the first time in years I think we had sort of got to actually completely utilizing our defense budget. So I think there were these common themes that you highlighted in various parts of your book. Did all of this also have an influence in sort of how you've now started coming out more open, and especially into the movement against corruption and with Shri Anna Hazare after your retirement?
Not really. I'll put it differently. See, like I said, the aim of this autobiography was to put things in perspective. It was not that when I became chief, I started suddenly clamoring that we have got deficiency. It is not when I became chief that I started saying that, hey, we have to stop corruption. It was not that suddenly the bulb started lighting up. No. It was built over a period of time. One started noticing deficiencies right from beginning. But one also started noticing a stock answer. Oh, we have told the higher headquarters they will do it. So when one reached the highest of headquarters and started finding out why things are not going, one found the reasons. And when one found the reasons and one tried to shake up things, one ran against a wall. Because a lot of things just don't move. There are too many wheels within wheels. And I think the biggest problem that we encounter as a country is that we have made rules which do not allow us to work. And those rules come in handy when we don't want to. And we just have to say, sorry, the rule doesn't permit. It has got no comma, no full stop, so you cannot do this. That is the problem. And that's why I've said that, we keep hearing, defense budget allotted so much, armed forces have not been able to spend it. A common man thinks armed forces are the biggest nincompoops on this earth. They can't spend the budget. They've been given X amount of money and they just can't spend it. And then they keep trying. I haven't got aircrafts, I haven't got ships, I haven't got guns. There's something drastically wrong. The reason is very simple. And that is what I've explained in the book. You are, let's say, given a budget of 30,000 crores. The finance department, there are two wings. There is the defense finance and there is the finance ministry. They decide how much they will allow you to spend. So, the defense finance will start slowing things down. If in 6 months you are supposed to, let's say, spend half this amount or 3/4 of this amount, they won't pass it. Your proposals won't get passed. They'll keep coming back for some odd reason or the other, including that you haven't put a full stop out. That's the actual truth. And then it goes to the finance ministry. They find the same reasons that the defense finance found to send the proposal back. So it's quite common when a Raksha Mantri tells you, no, this proposal will go through. 2 more times it has to come from finance ministry. That time it will go through. That happens. And this money, all these populist schemes that come up in the middle of the year, somebody decides I must give TV sets, somebody decides I'll give extra food and extra this. Where does this money come from? It's not in budgeted. It comes from the defense budget. Because that doesn't get passed, so it is reappropriated for such populist schemes, and the nation is told armed forces cannot spend their money. That's the beauty of the system.
You also mentioned about, you actually lamented in one part of your book about the lack of infrastructure, especially in Kashmir itself, as to how you don't see the economy developing in Kashmir, which is one of the challenges despite the funds that have been earmarked for the state. And you see this as one of the major obstacles to actually a more long-term solution to this problem itself.
I keep getting into problem with comments on Kashmir. They're still debating whether I should appear in front of the privileged committee or not. Nevertheless, I think there has been no accountability of funds that have gone into Kashmir. Accountability in terms of saying, look here, we have given you X amount of money for X purpose. Where is that purpose? Still in Kashmir, there are roads which are unpaved. There are areas which are bad. There is a massive so-called insurgency on, yet the building activity in Srinagar is going full pack. New houses coming up, costly houses coming up. Where are they coming up from? Where this money is coming up from? Nobody. So my feeling is that if this money had been utilized properly, in a planned manner, Kashmir would have been much better than Switzerland any day. And with its natural beauty, it would have probably ensured that all these people who talk of Azadi would have realized that they were much more Azad in a developed area than what they are talking about. So it's I think a great amount of things would have happened had this accountability been put into the place.
Sure. From one troubled area to another, you've also been right at the end of your tenure associated with this Northeast trilogy. If you can just tell us a little bit about that.
The Northeast have been associated with for quite some time, and more when I went as Eastern Army Commander. One saw how things were. Unfortunately, that is one area which is so far away from Delhi that nobody really cares for. And I can say with a lot of confidence, it is one of the most beautiful areas of Pakistan. Most beautiful people. You just have to go there. And there is a lot that can be done, not only to develop that area, but to integrate that area with the main country. Whether it is the road network, whether it is the type of nexus that has come up with the insurgency that was in place. Today, the amount of extortion that takes place, it finds places in property dealings in all the metro. All the metro. All that extortion money comes with. So, there is great amount that could have been done to really develop that area. And especially when the Vajpayee government made this great announcement of Look East policy, where they were looking at a road connectivity between India and Southeast Asia. Northeast is important. We have been talking of a great river project which will allow shipping to be done through the river. But to back up that, the infrastructure hasn't come up. We have been talking of it for the last 15 years. Nothing is done. So there is a, as they say in Hindi, karni or kathni. You say something but you don't do, then it's of no use. And I've also, I think I'll just steal a little this thing on it. I've also mentioned this in terms of our relationship with our neighbors, especially some of them whom we woo. And I've mentioned this great term that was used by the Myanmarese general when I visited Myanmar. And he said, "General, you are NATO." And I looked absolutely lost. I said, "But we are not part of NATO." And he had this funny smile on his face. He said, "What I mean is, no action, talk only."
Well, we could actually go on for the entire evening, but we are sort of running out of time and we were an eager audience here. So we've got only 15 minutes or so. I'd request you to actually just keep your questions very short so we can actually go through and get as many questions. Maybe I can start from this side and come this side, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm very privileged today with Commander Butt. My schoolmate is in that hall. My squadron mate from NDA, 1 course senior to me, is here. I also passed out as a general from NDA, and I'll request the audience to see the NDA program tonight on Discovery Channel. It's very important for you to understand the general psych, my psych, everybody's psych. Now, what you've spoken is absolutely correct.
I haven't spoken of the number of people you carried in a knee on leave.
I carried 37 in Sri Lanka, and the book allows about 24, but a war is a war. We are highly trained, highly dedicated soldiers when we go through the National Defence Academy. Secondly, we are great nationalists. We have this thing of service before self. We are highly patriotic, and we get really pissed off when we see misgovernance. Now that's where the public can come in. For example, throughout history, when you see, it has been finance which has been the backbone of armies, whether Islam, jizya tax, whether Clive with finance, and all these things. And the public can go and ask the MPs and MLAs elected under RTI, where is this money displayed? That's the bottom line. you'll save a lot of soldiers' lives, because even in Fort William, if you see the rows for the Chinese aggression, soldiers who died are longer than the 71 war in Fort William. Now my question to the general is, and there's one, because in NDA also I was a musician, he's probably not aware, that Joan Baez, there were two songs written on Bangladesh. One was by the Beatles, George Harrison, and one was by Joan Baez. And Joan Baez has covered all these aspects in a beautiful song called Bangladesh. So my only question is, suppose Sam had by chance told Indira Gandhi, before that I'd like to say that at partition time also, the shadow of the great game, and whether Cariappa had told them also that, look, I want to be the chief, I don't want to serve under the British generals. Now,
so if you can actually just answer
I'm finishing.
Thank you.
So the point is, if Sam had told Mrs. G, look ma'am, is it a better thing for us to go there, suck them, and militarily we can cut them off later, otherwise they're going to have this, what we see nowadays today, the tukda badla factor with them through ISI and various other things. That's my point. Do you think that could have been achieved?
Actually, but it's like this, that at that point of time, I think the only idea everybody had in mind was how to liberate. The end game probably had not been thought. And that is the problem. The Americans never thought of the end game in Iraq, they came to Greece. They have never thought of end game in Afghanistan, they have come to Greece. Till the time you don't in military strategy work out what your end game is going to be, what the end result is, what you actually want, you won't, it won't work. I think we never looked beyond what would happen after you have won or liberated. What are you going to do?
And before I wind up, I'm winding up.
I just request you, let's take this outside the podium, sir. There's a few.
Yeah, but just
we don't have a lot of time.
Just for the audience, if you want to know on his age, just punch in Op Moses by Shobha Day on Google. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm a great admirer of the armed forces, and my own grandfather was favorite Colonel Prem Kishan Kaul was in the armed forces. As a civilian, I sometimes wonder, it's very frustrating to see the military establishment of India, which, by the way, has been ranked 4th most effective at globalfirepower.net and by the CIA in terms of its military history and capability, to see it bound by bureaucratic convention. And I sometimes lament that it ought to be, that it's not given greater discretionary power to fight what you say in a manner that is more capability centered. Sometimes I feel that an offensive approach is the best defense, and there have been times where preemptive strikes could have facilitated a quicker victory, particularly, for example, when China was going through internal turmoil during the Cultural Revolution, and it was a good time for us to lay stake to Tibet at that point in time. Why are we as a nation not more offensive in terms of our military policy, and why do we always wait to be attacked?
If I answer your question truthfully, I'll get into a lot of trouble. But let me attempt in more diplomatic manner. I think it is because we have got a very wishy-washy strategic thinking in our policy makers. And I'm not talking the armed force. Policy makers are our political leadership who are more accustomed or are more concerned with vote banks and domestic politics. They don't look beyond. And that is why the strategic culture is that. So when you are looking at this, there is a paranoid fear that was created during the Nehru era. Hey, every country around is becoming a military dictatorship. Let's keep the military out. Tell them go and make houses. Incidentally, some of those houses are still intact. They haven't fallen. What the army made. They made houses at that time. And as a result, in 1962, we got a bad kick. Then people woke up. Something happened. But that paranoid feeling still continues. armed forces will carry out a coup. It's all hogwash. I think there's nobody else, like Bhatt said, who thinks of nation first and foremost than the armed forces. We breathe that the nation comes first, always and everywhere. It's just a feeling. And let me tell you, that is the feeling which makes us do things even when we don't have equipment. Which makes us do things when everything else goes wrong. So, till the time we don't have people, USA, why do you think there is a strategic culture? Because there are a lot of people who have been through the armed forces, who rose through the political line. And they brought in a culture of understanding the armed forces and how they should be handled as tools of the nation. And not just as armed forces which are like police.
Thank you.
Yes. The mic here. For this gentleman. Yes, hold on. Please. Let him ask the question.
Good afternoon, General Singh. My name is Praveen Koenka. I want to know what is the threat perception in India from China. We do read in the newspaper and the media that China makes a steady encroachment, but are we well prepared to offset any such surprises?
I would recommend you read some passages from the book where I've said that your policy towards China must be such that they must realize that they cannot do things which they are doing. The day that realization comes, the day you are firm, the day you are backed by a knowledge that you can do A, B and C and the other side knows, then you don't have to do it. That is our point. I would also recommend the book written by Jethmalani, only the China portion in that, and only one line I'll quote from that. He says, China will never be friendly with India because it has got to be the dominant power not only in Asia but of the status that it had as a middle power in the world. So you have to find a policy that propels you to a level where you are talking to a peer. At the moment you are not talking to a peer. He is way beyond.
So, I'm Arun Dev here. My question, you spoke about Sri Lankan issue, and you said it's a...
There's a lady who's actually waiting her turn. So let her first ask and then we'll come to you.
See, my question is a confusion. Might be 5 years before, I used to think I believed in the government, I believed in the army, and I had a perception that the army is meant to protect us. Then I started reading books of some of the political activists. I started looking into the videos like Arundhati Roy, and by continuously reading to these articles in the books and listening to those videos, I have a kind of perception in my mind that, as she says, that I live in a country where it's banana republic or whatever you say is, and when I read about Kashmir, I used to think only this army protects the Kashmiris, but after reading these books continuously, I always feel that it's not the army which protect the Kashmir. So when I continuously read, I'm completely confused whether this army is protecting us or it's all politics. The confusion I have, I think you have to clear it for me.
Thank you, ma'am. I will. Okay. Now, before I clear that confusion, let me tell you about the perceptual problems which we have. Have you heard of a person called Maniram Bagri?
No.
Okay. His election campaign was that this Bhakra Dam has come up in Punjab and they are taking out all the electricity from water, and this water which is flowing down into Haryana and Rajasthan has got no electricity. So it is not good for crops. People voted for it. That is a problem of perception. The first thing I would like you to clearly remember, the armed forces are the protectors of this nation. They will never allow, anything else to happen, despite what they have or what they don't. If they don't have anything, it's very simple. We tell ourselves when we were in the service, if I don't have it, I'll fight with what I have. But I'll not allow things to go wrong. Yes, sir. No, I think the confusion is different. Where Kashmir is concerned, there are a lot of falsehoods that are put out on Kashmir. Most of the army is deployed on the borders of Kashmir. A very less percentage is deployed in the internal areas to protect the population from the terrorists. And these terrorists are both outsiders as well as people who are home. And let me tell you, the power of gun makes them very powerful. They can go to any house, they can do what they want. So the army is protecting people. Anybody who tells you anything otherwise is like Mani Ramba.
Just a request, we don't have a lot of time, just one small short question.
Right, so you spoke about Sri Lanka being a policy failure, right? But do you think the military campaign we had in Sri Lanka was a failure? Question number, the military campaign we had in Sri Lanka was a failure. Question number one. Question number two, it's out of the interaction with the soldier who fought in Sri Lanka. Every soldier who fought in all the wars that happened in the country were respected, called heroes, but those who fought in Sri Lanka were not considered heroes by the country. He claims. Do you think that's right?
Your first question. Firstly, there was no military campaign for Sri Lanka. We went as a peacekeeping force to ensure that the Tamil area of the north and east are protected and people out there live a normal life. Why it turned the other way is what the policy failure was. As I look at it, which in I think 2 lines I've tried to put it in the book, that it was possible for us to create a situation like Cyprus. I haven't elaborated on it because I feel that there are a lot of intelligent people who will understand what I'm trying to say. The soldiers in Sri Lanka did an excellent job. And it's my firm conviction that junior leadership never failed the Indian Army. It was always the senior leadership that faltered when the time came. And that is why when domestic political compulsions were such that the forces were not being respected, somebody should have put his foot down. That was not. I mean, I've come out at after 2 years. Luckily, I never sailed back to Chennai from where I sailed out. I sailed to Mumbai, where everybody said Jai Ho. Nobody said that in Chennai. There's a difference. And again, the difference is because you went as protectors but ended up doing something else.
Anybody else? Yes?
What about Salman, where governments pay money to the civilians?
Ma'am, just a second, we'll come back.
Good evening, sir. I believe that Indian politics is ready for a coup without uniform. Indian politics is ready for a coup without uniform. I want to know why retired officers hesitate from joining politics. Why, sir? Why don't you take that salute at the Republic Day parade? Why?
Which field are you in?
Sir, my father was in the Air Force and my uncle was in the
good.
Army.
Let me tell you, I think most of the veterans, and I use the term veterans for all these services, most of the veterans are quite happy coming back after retirement and saying, I've done enough, let me play golf and let me go on my evening circuits, let me take a walk, let me pursue things which I didn't pursue during this period, and let me castigate everybody who comes on the TV, and that be.
Sir, Indian politics is also a golf, you know.
No.
Challenging.
So there is a need, and last year and a half I'm trying to motivate our veterans that it is time for them to give back what they've taken from the nation. And that is by actively participating in bringing a change, whether you go and motivate people, whether you select good people, whether you ensure that bad people do not get elected. All that can be done by our veterans. There is a great amount of power in them, provided they want to shake themselves up and say, no golf for 5 days, I'll only play golf for 1 year. I've stopped playing golf, incidentally, after I retired.
Thank you, sir.
The mic here in front.
In the last 10 to 15 years, India has seen a lot of excellence in all the non-governmental areas. Like we are one of the best doctors, engineers in US, heading Pepsi, multinational, and so on and so forth. Professors being chosen from India. IT, it's an IT superpower, but it's all non-government. Whenever there comes government, we see all the inefficiencies. So, do you think, or what is your advice from bringing in so much of excellence in non-governmental areas to government, especially army being the first, most important? What will you advise army and defense forces to take from such a huge pool of excellence which we have?
See, we get 60,000 people who retire every year. And I'm quite sure if we were imaginative, we could have utilized them for nation building in a much better way. Give you a small example. The government thought of the e-governance project. It is going in some places. All that it requires is, if you have an ex-serviceman in that village, give him the task, give him the hardware, he'll ensure that all your e-governance requirements from that village can be fed to all heads on top. But that needs a system which is honest to itself. If you're going to ask this man, hey, I'm going to put a hardware in your house, how much money I will get, then this man is not going to give you money. That is the... So, somebody asked me, I think this is what happens when the army is speaking.